Hello lovely people, welcome to another book chat, the weekly roundup of stuff I've read at some point in the past. I just have two books I want to talk about this week, but I have like a lot to say on both of them, so I thought let's keep it concise if we can.
Sophie Vlogs.
First up is a book that I read on my Kindle, that is Ayesha at Last by Uzma Jalaluddin. This is a very sweet romance book. It's part Pride and Prejudice retelling. There's also elements of like Shakespearean comedy in here. I had a really fun time. So this follows Aisha, who has always wanted to be a poet, but she's sort of had to settle for just being like a teacher. She's a very progressive Muslim. In comparison, Khalid is quite a conservative Muslim. He's always been happy with his mother arranging his marriage. These two meet, as you might expect from a Pride and Prejudice retelling. Initially there is some friction between them, but then as it goes on, maybe there are feelings underneath. I liked that the Muslim characters both had two different, quite distinct relationships to their faith. Like, Khalid is very devoted and conservative, whereas Ayesha is a bit more progressive and that sort of thing. Another thing I really loved about this is I really loved Ayesha's grandparents. I thought that they were both absolutely lovely. Her grandfather is used to be a Shakespearean professor. Her grandmother is just like a bit of a force of nature, and I liked that. I just thought they were absolutely lovely. There were some really sweet moments in the romance side of this. For example, Aisha's grandmother teaching her and Khalid how to cook. There was just like, that was like a really lovely scene. So there's a lot of like really things that I like about this. One thing that I will say is I do think that there were potentially slightly too many threads going on. Just because, like, for example, there is an antagonist in Khalid's workplace who is a boss who essentially is Islamophobic and judges him and treats him badly because of the way that he presents in a very conservative manner. There is another antagonist who is Khalid's mother, who is antagonistic towards Ayesha because she wants to arrange Khalid's marriage herself. The thing about Khalid's mother is that I felt like I wanted a little bit more nuance towards her. There's a thing which is revealed, which is very serious, and I didn't feel like we really got like that wasn't really dealt with a lot. It was just sort of like, it was a reveal that was shocking, and then I was like, but surely there should be some repercussions from this thing that we all now know about. And then also, I just wanted to have a bit of a better understanding of his mother's motivation, because at the start, you really see that she's just like, she loves her son. She wants to make sure that he has the best setup in life possible. And I can see that motivating her, but then when this extra stuff is revealed, she sort of becomes like a cartoonish villain, and I wanted a little bit more depth to her rather than just like a dragon of a human who did some terrible things that aren't really dealt with properly. There's also like a figure who's like a George Wickham figure, if we're following like the Pride and Prejudice route, which means there is also someone who is like a Lydia figure. That character I felt like it felt like there was a lot of characters in this who were just really mean to Ayesha, and like it is addressed a little bit at the end, but I also just felt like there was just a lot of like really casual meanness to Ayesha, which I was like, I really don't feel like we've actually repented from this, and I don't know. And then finally, another. I don't want to sound like I didn't like this book. It's just there are like some niggles that I have. A final one is that all throughout the book, Khalid is really. A lot of people like mock him for his appearance. He has a very long beard. He wears a lot of traditional clothing and stuff like that, and he's mocked for it quite a lot. And then like towards the end, he has like a makeover moment, and then suddenly he's like a cool guy. I don't know. I don't know. I felt a bit bad because I felt like it sort of felt a bit like the message was that like, yes, he did need to change, and I was just like, but did he need to change, or really was the message that, like, for example, this person in his workplace who's being discriminatory against him, it shouldn't matter that what he's wearing, like, she's being discriminatory against him based on his religion, like, I don't know. So, like, there was a lot that I liked about this book. I liked this, like, family dynamic. I liked the way it did play around with Pride and Prejudice and Shakespearean comedy, like, structure and that sort of stuff, and there were some really sweet romantic moments. There was a lot going on, which meant that sometimes it felt like some things were rushed, whereas some things we spent a lot of time with, and I just think maybe if there might have been, like, one or two less strands, we might have been able to explore a couple of things more fully. I don't know. But I did enjoy it, and it was a sweet romance. Oh, another thing I meant to say. I haven't read a lot of romance. I think I'm quite early on in my romance reading journey, but I also really liked that both of the characters have never been in relationships before, and I quite liked that that was just like a thing, that they were just like, yeah, I've been saving myself for the person I'm going to marry, and I haven't read a lot of romance, so I'm not saying that this is not a thing that happens in romance, but all of the romance that I have read has been stuff that has like, there have been culmination moments where like people get it on and stuff like that. So it was just, I quite enjoyed reading a romance where like it's just a fine thing that these people have never had those experiences because they're saving themselves, because that's a perfectly fine thing to do, and I just liked that. The other book I want to talk about I did not really enjoy, and I actually DNF'd it, but I have thoughts on it. This is News from Nowhere and Other Writings by William Morris. I've mentioned before that I actually really like the Pre-Raphaelites. I really like William Morris. I think he did a lot of things, and I think he did them really well, and I really liked that about him. I did not like this book. News from Nowhere is essentially like, it's about this guy who, he's from the Victorian times, and then he wakes up in this future, and it's kind of like, as he's asking all these questions about how the society functions, and it's essentially like William Morris like presenting to you this like idealized socialist society. I just had so many problems with what the society was. Like, point number one, everyone lives a really long time now, but not because there's been improvements in medicine, just because they're happier. This also means things like, for example, back in the day, because people were like morally bankrupt, that's why they were really ugly. Now that everyone is like morally really good, everyone's beautiful and they age really slowly. Which also then led into stuff like they were saying that like leprosy no longer exists. The implication being because they're now morally good, these diseases no longer exist. And I think that there is going into some real ableist territory when we start to be like, illness is a sign of morally bankrupt behaviour, and I just am not here for that at all. Then there was the whole, like, he asks about, like, I know in the Victorian times the emancipation of women was a topic, like, where are you at with that? And it's like, women are now emancipated, women and men are now equal. It just happens that women really love doing housework because they're innately good at housework, and that's why all these women are like being waitresses at where they're eating and like looking after houses and stuff. And then they also talk about like the folly of those women who wanted to be able to control whether or not they had children, and they were like, oh well, because life is so good now, all women want to have children because they know that their children will live really well, rather than like the question being like, do you actually want to have a child or not? I also hated that, and it also annoyed me because like in the arts and crafts movement there are a lot of women working alongside men, and that's something that I really like about that. Like literally William Morris's wife and daughter were really involved in the production of like the embroidery and stuff that they did. There's also like a weird anti-reading thing that's running throughout, and it's like they don't teach people to read until they're like 20, but they apparently just pick up reading because there's just books lying around everywhere, which is also weird because I think one thing that strikes me from this is that William Morris is like an intellectual socialist. Like, he's made his money from creating like luxury furniture and like wallpaper and stuff for middle class people. Like, William Morris is not a working class man, and his clients are not working class men, and he has all these principles which like in many ways I respect, but also a lot of his socialism is also drawing on this like idealized version of medieval society as well, and I just think that these things are quite apparent when you read this book. I don't know, it really annoyed me, so I didn't finish it. But yes, that's everything I wanted to talk about this week. Just two things, but I had like lots of thoughts to unpack on them. I would really like to know if you have read either of these things, what your thoughts on them are. Otherwise, I will see you next time for something different where I'm hopefully a little cheerier.